Hello and welcome back to this channel of odds and ends of British language and culture. Today I thought we'd have a look at what is the shortest of the well-known dynasties of England, namely the Norman dynasty. Very short, less than 90 years actually, from 1066 until 1154. 1066, you already know all about that, and if you don't, have a look at the video on the year 1066. Now, when I say the shortest dynasty, you might immediately think, oh well, it can't be all that important then. No, that's certainly not true. The Normans had a huge impact on society in England. They had a number of key realizations that they are responsible for and that have consequences until today. So let's have a look at the Normans, shall we? If we have a more or less chronological look at the dynasty of the Normans, we have to start off with William I. William I, also known as William the Conqueror, or the Duke of Normandy, or his French nickname, Guillaume le Bâtard. In the person of William I, the Normans introduced the feudal system in England. Before that, there was no feudal system in England, even though that system had been around for centuries already in Europe. That system determined the social, economic and political order. It was the so-called pyramid system with a big base layer of laborers and only the king at the top. The king was, in that system, the owner, the absolute owner of land, of basically everything in the country. The king then, in a kind of logical idea, divided the kingdom into different areas that he would give to his earls, his barons, his so-called vassals to manage. So you had the king at the top and then under him a number of vassals, his tenants in chief. They managed the land for the king. At the very bottom of the pyramid you had then the serfs, peasants, laborers, very often bound to the land they were working on. They were not slaves in the sense that they could not be bought or sold as such, but they could be sold together with the land. So in many respects they were slaves. They could not leave the land that they were bound to. They couldn't even marry without their lord's approval. Under that feudal system, you also had the idea of the liege, which was the unconditional bond between a man and his overlord. And that bond determined who someone has to fight for and who they have to pay tax to. And that was, of course, quite important. One of the realizations of William I was also the Grand Council. Under his rule, the earls and barons, his tenants-in-chief, they were required to serve in that Grand Council. You could say that that was kind of the first forerunner of Parliament. Another of the achievements of William I was the so-called Domesday Book, which he ordered for himself in order to be able to rule the country. Now, the name is slightly misleading. Nowadays, when you hear of Doomsday, you think of a kind of day of reckoning, a day that everything will be destroyed or something. It's got nothing to do with that. The Doomsday Book was essentially an overview of the possessions of all the tenants of the king. It was a detailed inventory of all the land of the country. Many villages, towns, and so on, they can trace their history back to a mention in the Doomsday Book, and they will then proudly say that they were already mentioned in the Doomsday Book that long ago. One of the things also to mention when talking about the Norman dynasty is the Norman architecture. That term may not be known to you. It means the kind of architecture with rounded arches, thick walls, and heavy pillars. Generally, you might know it as a Romanesque style, and that term is more well known. A couple of examples of that style. You have the well-known Tower of London. That was originally a Norman style building. Also Rochester Castle and Norwich Castle. Back to the kings. When William I died, he was succeeded by his second son, William II, nicknamed Rufus. You might think, why not his first son? Normally in a feudal system and in a system of dynasty, it's the first son who will inherit the kingdom. Well, Robert, the first son, he became Duke of Normandy, which really tells you that at that time, in the Norman dynasty, Normandy was considered to be more important than England. So William II becomes King of England. When he dies, the younger brother, the third son, younger brother Henry, claims the throne of England. Now, Robert, the first son, he contests that claim, and eventually they fight for the throne of England, and Robert is defeated. And so England and Normandy are effectively reunited under King Henry I, still of the Norman dynasty. When Henry I dies without an heir, or rather without a direct male heir, it is his cousin, Stephen of Blois, or Stephen of Blois, who is crowned king. But Henry did have a daughter, and this daughter, Matilda, challenges Stephen to the throne. What follows is a civil war, sometimes called the Anarchy, and it's a fairly long civil war. Under the feudal system, the king can only count on those tenants-in-chief who actually support him. So a number of the barons actually supported Matilda, and a period follows that is pretty chaotic, with supporters of Stephen and Matilda fighting for control of cities, towns, areas, and it just kept going on. In the meantime, Matilda married Geoffrey Plantagenet of Anjou, and they had a son called Henry. Now, of course, that Henry, a male, was effectively an heir of Henry I, and he indeed again challenges Stephen for the crown. Stephen and Henry don't fight all that long, but they sign a treaty. They agree to a peace treaty, the Treaty of Wallingford in 1153. In that treaty, Stephen is recognized as king, but the king recognizes that Henry will be his successor. And that comes sooner than expected. The next year already, Stephen dies, and Henry succeeds him as Henry II. But he is not a Norman anymore, because he's the son of Geoffrey Plantagenet. Henry II is the first of the Plantagenet dynasty. So I hope you will realize now that the Norman dynasty was fairly important, in spite of the fact that the dynasty didn't last very long. Please give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you next time on another topic. Bye bye.